All right. All right. We will do it. Welcome, everybody. I'll kick us off and then I'll turn it over to Paul and Olga. But I'll kind of outline the plan for this morning, this afternoon for everybody. All right. So to everybody, panelists and attendees, welcome. Welcome to the SPARC Symposium. I'm Joel Kaplan, professor in the School of Criminal Justice and at Rutgers University and director of the Rutgers Center on Public Security, as well as co-founder and COO of SimC. I'm honored to serve as your moderator for today's event. The SPARC Symposium stands for Students of Professional Practice and Applied Research in the Classroom, is a showcase of student-driven work at the intersection of professional practice and academic inquiry. I'm joined today with Andy Horn, Director of Growth at SimC, who's led the charge at SimC to help give all of these presenters a platform to share their RTM projects and to become our teachers this morning. The symposium is co-hosted by Anglia Ruskin University, Tarleton State University, and Wilfrid Laurier University, where many of today's presenters take classes from renowned professors and mentors. Special shout outs to Paul Hasselwood and Olga Simukina, who are here today and will introduce their students in just a moment. Today, you're going to hear from student presenters who have applied theoretical knowledge to real-world challenges, integrated professional methods into classroom learning, and reflected on their experiences to generate new insights that inform both education and professional practice. We'll feature presentations followed by discussions and then a Q&A at the end to connect students' findings to practical implications for the classroom and beyond. This is important for many reasons, one of which is that this symposium, the inaugural symposium, and hopefully the first of many to come each and every year, can empower emerging professionals in the classroom to bridge the gap between classrooms, theory, and practice. It's a space for students to synthesize learning, for educators to witness applied innovation, and for all of us to consider new models of teaching, learning, and professional engagement. Today's format will be as follows. Each presenter team will have 5 to 7 minutes. These are lightning talks, 5 to 7 minutes to go over their projects. We will have about 9 presenters in all, and then that will be followed by a Q&A open to all of the attendees and other panelists to really challenge everyone with some creative and innovative questions for them to be able to answer. Please feel free to type in the chat or to virtually raise your hand, and we'll give you the opportunity to ask your questions directly. To begin, I'm going to turn it over to the faculty and instructors and professors from each university to give a brief introduction to their universities, and then to introduce their first student. We'll start with Anglia Ruskin University. I know your day is almost over, so we'll give you the opportunity to go first. Paul, if you would, please feel free to give a quick introduction to your program, your course, and your university, and then introduce your first student. After your first student goes, we'll turn it over to Olga, who will do the same, and then we'll go back and forth between presenters from each university. All right, so without further ado, Paul, mic is yours.
Brilliant. Thank you ever so much for inviting us, Joel and the SimC team. My name is Paul Hesselwood. I'm the course director for an undergraduate degree in crime and investigative studies on the Cambridge campus here at Anglia Ruskin University. Today, you're going to hear from 2 distinct groups of undergraduates. The first group were introduced to risk terrain modelling at the start of their second year, and in groups they explored crime trends in and around the city of Cambridge in collaboration with the local police force and the chief inspector from the city-based team. And they would then present those findings back, much as they're going to do today, to the police. The second group of undergraduates had undertaken that evidence-based policing module, but then used risk terrain modelling in their dissertations. So they've explored particular themes, and there's a couple, I think, of novel approaches today, which would be quite interesting to hear people's opinions on. So that's me, that's the course. I think I saw Will online. I might ask Will if he can present his project.
Yeah, I'm all ready to go. That's all good. Okay.
When you're ready, Will. we're ready.
See if I can share my screen. Can everyone see the PowerPoint? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. I'm sorry. All right, I'll get going. Okay, so shut my camera on as well. Give me a second, sorry. Okay, hello everyone. My name's Will, and I've just recently finished my studies at Anglia Ruskin as part of the Crime and Investigative Studies course. And I'm here to discuss my project, which explored the correlations between assault against police officers and societal factors in England and Wales. Just for some context, between 2023 and 2024, there were over 44,000 assaults committed against police officers, which included a 15.5% increase in non-injury assaults from the previous year. As this graph shows, assaults have been followed an upward trend since 2014 and aligns with the decline in public trust towards police, which was down 10% in 5 years. Research shows that these assaults don't just cause physical harm, they can lead to long-term psychological effects, including PTSD and reduced job satisfaction. So the 5 societal factors that I chose were average net income, deprivation, population density, unemployment benefit claims, and youth arrests. And I first utilized the mapping software QGIS to allow all the data sets for the assault and societal factors to be projected visually. And there's a few examples at the bottom there where I have the assaults against officers, average net income, and population density, and it has the borders of all the police forces in England and Wales to show the sort of patterns and the disparities between each force. After I completed this, the factors were classified into quantiles, and I chose the upper third for each factor for the RTM analysis. And within RTM, the assaults against officers was chosen as the issue layer, and I ran the analysis over 25 by 25 kilometer squares. And this is the output result here. It showed urban areas such as London, Birmingham, Manchester, Liverpool, and Leeds. They emerged as exceptionally risky areas. It resulted that population density was actually the strongest predictor of an assault against an officer, and they were 12 times more likely to be assaulted in areas with extremely high population density compared to others. An explanation for this is that these urban areas and cities have larger police forces and more budget assigned to them, which means they lead to more interactions and extremes such as London's wealth inequality can heighten tensions to cause these interactions and so on and so on. So to summarize, the risk terrain modeling successfully identified high-risk clusters by analyzing spatial overlaps of the 5 societal factors. The 25 by 25 kilometer squares revealed assault patterns. However, it was over England and Wales. And through some further research and micro-scale analysis of each exceptionally risk area, it would be of much greater value and to police if they were to, use risk terrain modeling as a tool to try and stop these assaults against their officers. And like I said, it improves RTM's value in potential strategic resource allocation across the police forces. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Will. A true lightning talk, good setup for everybody else to follow. You've set the bar high in quality and being concise. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
All right, I'm going to turn it over to Olga to introduce herself, to introduce her program and her first student presenter.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Samukina from Tarleton State University, and today with me I have four of our PhD students, so doctoral students, and they are going to present four different projects. Three of them are based on local data from Texas, Dallas and Fort Worth area, which is where we're located, and one of them going to present on Portland, Oregon data. And this is a part of my predictive policing class. And we have two different cohorts here representing two different cohort students. And the projects vary from, all kinds of different crimes. So I'm going to let students to introduce their projects themselves. And I'm going to have Kevin present first.
All right, let's see if I can get it pulled up. I also want to apologize. I'm getting tile installed today, and my dogs are not happy. So if you hear anything, I apologize. Let's see. Okay, hopefully everybody can see that. All right.
Got it.
Perfect. So like Dr. Sumakina said, this is data that comes from Fort Worth. Let me see. So this is mapping vulnerability and across the homeless victimization in Fort Worth, Texas. We look at how environmental and routine activities influence victimization among the homeless in Fort Worth. So this is our location. For those of y'all outside of the states, Fort Worth is within Texas, so it's marked there on the map. And then on the right are all the police districts that we used to break up the different terrains. So it's one of the largest cities in the US. It's home to a significant vulnerable homeless population. And the data that we covered the period that we covered is from January 2019 to March of 2023. So it covers the COVID time as well. It includes all cases where individuals were listed as victims of crimes that the Fort Worth police took reports on. They were victims of crimes against persons and property. So the goal was to use risk terrain modeling to visualize this spatial risk and understand how these location-based factors might influence the patterns of victimization. The risk factors that we incorporated into this are on the right. These are all just from past previous literature looking at victimization among the homeless. And for the theoretical framework, we worked into here Cohen and Felson's routine activities theory, which argues that crime occurs when the three elements converge: time, space, in time and space, a motivated offender, a suitable target, and the absence of a capable guardian. So this helps us operationalize the theory RTM does by identifying these locations and seeing where these three elements are likely to converge within Fort Worth. So the rest of these couple of slides are going to be the maps that RTM helped generate. This is the East Division, and on the left you have just an overall concept of victimization, and then on the right is specifically the COVID months. And the dark areas have a relative risk factor of 13.87 or more, so these are our high incident areas. This is the East Division, the North Division. This little cutout in the middle is a different city, so you don't have to worry about that. That's Hazlitt. This is the Northwest Division. The South Division. And our West Division. So what I really want to talk about is spend more time here. Across the board, we found that the risks were not evenly distributed. Certain areas, particularly those near transit hubs, liquor stores, and different service providers, that is homeless service providers, consistently showed a higher relative risk value. So here is just the reports of the max for each COVID and just the overall. And then this is the breakdown of the RRVs for each division. So like I said, you can see the grocery stores, the bus stops, the liquor stores. These are the places of highest risk. So applying the theory to that, supports the routine activities theory that the absence of public life during COVID kind of diminished the opportunities for victimization. It wasn't necessarily that crime disappeared, but just everybody's routines with the lockdowns and everything changed. So crime was also reported less frequently and less predictably. So hopefully using RTM and these insights can help if any other future type of pandemic happens or any kind of issue that impacts routine activities. So in conclusion, the RTM is proven to be a powerful tool, so we appreciate that, for translating criminological theory into spatial analysis. By applying this approach, we're able to really identify where and how their risk is structured in the urban landscape and how that structure changed in these extraordinary circumstances such as COVID. So if there's not any questions, I think we're holding those to the end. So thank y'all.
We will hold the questions to the end, but please don't forget your questions, especially for the early presenters. So write them down, take some notes, put them in the chat window. We'll definitely come back to them. So we'll give everybody some time to answer them. Thank you very much for that. We are on a roll with quality and brevity. We will turn it back over to Paul. Introduce your next presenter.
So next up, I'd like Isla and Awesome Dawn, if they could, to share their presentation around crime in Cambridge. When you're ready, ladies.
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Autumn Dawn.
I'm Isla.
And we looked at how risk terrain modelling can help investigate antisocial behaviour decreasing within Cambridge.
Okay, so we looked at antisocial behaviour. It is quite a broad crime aspect, and it's categorised into 3 types, which is personal, nuisance, and environmental. According to the Crime Survey of England and Wales, it is a prevalent crime type, and due to 36% of people having experienced or witnessed some form of ASB in the past year, it makes it quite costly for the government to reduce it, which is why evidence-based policing approaches as hotspot policing and the SARA model are productive, cost-effective methods to reducing the crime. ASB is also subjective and influenced by the environments due to their population and the community that is exposed to crime. So we looked at 3 months, which was June, July, and August. This was significant to our geographical factors, as these months, including our 6-week school summer holidays, were determined to increase the opportunity for young offenders due to the lack of school structure. We included factors of outdoor spaces such as benches, parks, and wooded areas, as well as free time faculties such as sports centres and recreational spaces. Due to our hypothesis, this was more frequently visited during the summer months and school holidays.
So these 2 diagrams show our results from using risk terrain modelling. They highlight hotspot areas for antisocial behaviour from our dataset that we used, and where the hotspot areas and statistically significant factors overlap. And so our little areas that you can see are 250 metres squared each. So from this, all of the risk factors that we inputted, bus stops came back as the most statistically significant. This means that within a 250 metre square radius of a bus stop, antisocial behaviour is 2.3 times more likely to occur. From this information, we had to determine whether or not these factors were significant due to their sheer frequency within the area, or whether or not it could be argued that they had clear links to antisocial behaviour. So Cambridge is an area where there's lots of bus stops, good use of public transport. So we had to decide whether or not we actually thought this was relevant to our investigation. So we found that Cambridge CSP, so Community Safety Partnership, used posters about antisocial behaviour on actual buses to try and bring awareness to this. And so we deemed that it was a relevant factor to antisocial behaviour rates within Cambridge. As well as this, we noticed that places of worship appear in most of our 250 square radius areas. And this led us to discuss ideas that places of worship could be included in methods for decreasing crime, such as antisocial behaviour. So due to our data not including age of offenders, time of day of offence, day of the week of offence, or the type of antisocial behaviour, we recognised that our data was limited in that sense, in depicting a full picture of what we were trying to investigate. However, despite these limitations, using risk terrain modelling meant that we could pinpoint intervention areas and link factors to high risk areas. If we delved further into this, we would run risk terrain modelling again, including places of worship as a geographical factor, and we would see if there was a statistical significance to this as well. This would help allow our ideas about using places of worship as effective mentoring facilities to reduce antisocial behaviour to expand and be explored further. Thank you for listening to our talk.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. All right. I'm taking a lot of notes, so I'm looking forward to our discussion. I hope everybody else is doing the same. Olga, I'm going to turn it back over to you to introduce our next presenter.
And thank you so much for explaining the differences about what it means, the abbreviation, because it took me a little bit to realize what it was. Thank you. We are going next with Shay Robinson, and he's going to be talking about differences in the sporting events that we have in Dallas-Fort Worth area and how it's related to the vehicle burglaries.
All righty, let's okay. Which one do y'all see? Do y'all see the full PowerPoint?
Yeah, the full PowerPoint.
Okay, cool. All right, so jumping into this, when I took this predictive policing class, I was really interested in sporting events and the relationship with crime as research started talking about how there's an increase between sports and crime. And a lot of the studies out there focused on mega events, Super Bowls, Olympics, and then they kind of transition to regular scheduled games between sporting events. But the research has pretty much shown that it's mixed. Sometimes there's reductions in crime, sometimes there's increases in crime, but generally around property crime, there's about a 9% increase around professional sporting events. So basically that told me we need more research on it and to look into it. So what I found when I was going through all of this was there is a lack of focus on specific crimes such as burglary of motor vehicle, as well as stadiums that host multiple professional sport franchises in one building. Because when those stadiums share venues, there's going to be an overlap where sometimes they may both play a game in the same day, which can, make for, way more ambient population in that area. So the main things I really want to talk about is the study side is going to be Central Dallas, Texas, and Dallas is next to Fort Worth. It's the host of the Stars and the Dallas Mavericks. Both teams have had success with attendance, and during the study time from 22 to 2024, the Mavericks have brought in 2.4 million fans, and the Dallas Stars have brought in 2.2 million fans, and they've been known for consecutive sellout games. And in the downtown area, it has a really dense area of restaurants, activities, hotels, entertainment to make that area, more vibrant for those who come to the games, which, as we know, results in increased crowds, etc. So again, I just wanted to kind of see how do BMVs increase on game days compared to non-game days? What environmental risk
factors influence this, and are burglaries higher on double header games when both games play? So for my framework, I use a combination of routine activities, crime pattern theory, and risky place theory. Past literature has all supported these it helped make my decision on that and explain. So again, I'm looking at BMVs in the area from 22 to 2024. We had a total of 10,594, and then broke it up by game, specific game, how many incidents happened during those time period, and I used RTMDX for that. So the main risk factors I tested was bars, bus stops, hotels, rail stops, restaurants, sport retail stores, and sports stadiums. And for my analysis, I did proximity and density just based on the literature that's out there. And I used a 500 foot value, which is the average block length in Dallas. So the main things I want to talk about is the relative risk score. The Dallas Stars had the highest relative risk score at 26.49, but it had it was more tightly clustered. There wasn't as many hotspots for that. Double header days, which they didn't have as many BMV incidents, but it was more spread out, and it covered 12.3% of the study area, which I thought was interesting. And then Mavericks and non-game days had similar characteristics, but this kind of told me that the type of game matters. The type of game day matters. So out of all the tested risk factors, restaurant was the one that was significant across all three models, and had the highest risk on doubleheader games, which to me, you have a lot of people in those areas, cars being left unattended. So it kind of made sense. Bars and nightclubs was also important across all except for doubleheader. And then as we can see here, the Dallas Stars, the hockey games, they had the most risk factors, and just about everything on there had some sort of inherent risk, which I thought was interesting. The maps, I put all the maps together to kind of visualize it. I used the all relative risk maps. I just like the way that looks. But yeah, you can see here where the double headers kind of spread out, and then the difference between the three maps. And then just some limitations I wanted to acknowledge real quick is that I didn't include on non-game days other events that could increase ambient population, such as concerts and things of that. And I didn't look at specific times, and I just want to do that in the future. But in short, this study kind of showed that BMV incidents near multi-tenant sporting venues on game days, there are differences between game day types. Hockey games had the highest localized risks, and non-game doubleheader games had more dispersed BMV patterns. Environmental features did impact the risk of BMV incidents, which all of this I think it's beneficial to use, especially when you're setting up op plans or things of that nature, as far as how you're going to, instead of focusing on just inside the arena and outside the arena, spread out into other areas where risk could happen. So that's it.
Thank you, Shay. Good stuff, everyone. Let's see. We are turning it over back to Paul. Do we have any other presenters from your side?
Yeah, we have Caitlin and Ellie, who are going to look at different aspects of crime in Cambridge.
Fantastic. The mic is yours.
Sorry, I'm no good at this, trying to work out how I'm going to share my screen. I think I'm getting there, sorry.
It's okay, take your time.
Can we see it or?
Not yet.
Oh. Sorry. Oh, Caitlin's mic won't work. This is going to be fun. There's always one, and it was always going to be us.
That's okay. Well, you can you can act out the slides, and we can play charades on behalf of you.
That's would make it even worse. Here we go. Can
There
we
you
Yeah,
go.
we accept interpretive dance as an option.
Yes,
Can we see it?
you got it.
Perfect. So Caitlin's not able to talk. This is going to be brilliant.
Can you hear me?
Oh,
Is it working?
yes.
Okay, perfect.
Right, let's pretend none of that happened. Let's try again.
Okay, so our presentation is on public order offences in Cambridge using risk terrain modelling, and we focused on identifying spatial risk factors for public order.
So using the public order offences that are outlined on the government website, it was riots, affray, disorderly behaviour, violent disorder, threatening behaviour, racially or religiously disorderly behaviour with intent to cause harassment.
Scanning identifies and prioritises potential crime and disorder problems. So we looked at the number of public order offences over different time periods. So the last 3 years, there was 2,026. The last 12 months, there was 632. And the month of October 2024, there was only 56. Oh, sorry, it's me again. Using the analysis section of the SARA model, we identified common locations of public order offences, which include nightclubs, pubs, public transport like bus stops and the train station, fast food and kebab shops, on and off licenses, and near places of worship. We also came up with a list of presumed underlying causes, which are overconsumption of alcohol, substance abuse, social and economic inequality, youth and student demographics, social tension, and tourism.
So using those factors, the map shows us the priority places and the exceptionally risky places, with light blue being the high priority places and dark blue being the exceptionally risky places. In light blue, it was the places with a relative risk score equal to or greater than the top 1% value. And the dark blue was a relative risk score 2 standard deviations or more above the mean, that intersect with recent past exposures. I mapped this using public order data, street light data, bus stops off licenses, on licenses, and on and off licenses combined. I then mapped it against density and proximity. The map showed that every section, when we looked into it, had a pub or nightclub. Other sections had a religious building or mosque, and the main hotspots were identified on another slide. We found that kebab and fast food shops were popular places after a night out, with high amounts of drunk people in these small shops, which often led to fights. On and off licenses, as they have, one has the permit to sell alcohol for consumption elsewhere, with on licenses permitting the consumption of alcohol on site. Drunken fights and disputes were likely to take place. Street lights, we believe that the lack of street lights increased the likelihood of these offences occurring. But it was debatable whether this had a massive impact, as there's a lot of street lights. So within every distance, there was always going to be a street light, no matter the public order or not. And bus stops, which have a high foot traffic of individuals from different places, creating opportunity for conflicts to occur, which could escalate into fights.
We identified the hotspots of public order offences using risk terrain modelling. So all of these were what was shown on the risk terrain modelling map that we made. And then in response to the public order offences, we've suggested some of the following. So we suggested to increase visible police preferences and presence in identified hotspots during peak times, launch public awareness campaigns about acceptable behaviour, work with bars and clubs to implement responsible alcohol serving practices, so like alcohol restrictions, work in partnership with the council to reinforce on and off licenses asking for ID when selling alcohol, and educate people on acceptable behaviour in public from a young age.
So although we were able to map against the factors that I mentioned earlier, we felt that having limited access to information about the public order crimes reported meant we weren't able to produce specific responses. Certain factors that we felt could be influencing these crimes that we weren't aware of are whether we knew a specific age group. So it's there's a lot of students in Cambridge, so we felt that if we knew a most common age for those that are committing public order offences, if they were under 18, then we could reinforce IDs and off licenses. If we felt we knew more specific age groups responsible for it, we could tackle the groups in a more controlled location, such as youths in schools or colleges. We felt if we knew a specific month, then that had much higher levels of public order, we could make sure there was extra measures in place to tackle it. If we knew specific days or times, for example, Friday, Saturday evenings, if they had the highest levels, then we could maybe link it to nights out and have more resources in place for these nights and times. And if we knew more detailed information about victims and defendants, then we could try and identify similarities as well as just locations. We felt that the key issues were based around religions, but this would require a completely different response if it was to do with students. So we felt like we couldn't come up with an outcome and then know how to respond unless we knew more specifics. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Excellent work. Good teamwork too. Let's see, we'll turn it over to Olga for our next presenter.
All right. I think we are going with David so that we can continue with our Texas theme, and then we'll switch to the last presenter, who would be a different one.
Good morning, and I think good afternoon to some of y'all as well. And can everybody see my screen? All right. So there's a lot to unpack here in a very short amount of time. So I will just jump right into it. What we're looking at here, or what I was looking at in this research, was felony drug arrest in Dallas, Texas. The examination was conducted to both as a way to bridge the gap between the practitioner as well as the research side of things. We were going to evaluate the different types of locations as they compared to, or as they affected drug arrest, and try to determine if there's any correlation between any of the locations and any of the other facets that we had. We used penalty group 1 arrest. Since we've got some folks from outside the area, penalty group 1, that's what we talk about in Texas, is the hard type drugs. It's going to be methamphetamine, that's going to be heroin, that's going to be the other hard, traditional, what you would think about as illegal narcotics. It does not cover marijuana, prescriptions, pills, and during this time period, it did not cover the most recent catchphrase, which is fentanyl. This analysis was specifically done to try and see if there was any correlation between the locations that we had in Dallas, more of the traditional locations, hotel, motels, convenience stores, and those types of things, and their effect or the potential effect on drug crime. The goal was to try and identify locations where there may be more activity, as well as the potential for drug distribution locations. The location of the sample comes from Dallas, Texas. There was a total. We analyzed data from January 2022 through August of 2024, and there was about 2,930 cases total. You can see the breakdown in the arrest for each year below that. There was a significant increase from 2022 to 2023. And I know we've already talked a little bit about this, so I'm just going to go over the area a little bit. But Dallas is a major metropolitan city in Texas. It's the 9th largest city in the United States, and the Dallas-Fort Worth-Arlington area is the 4th largest metropolitan area in the U.S. As you can see from that picture there, Dallas is located on the eastern side of the DFW area, and is surrounded by a large suburban population, urban-suburban population. Demographics across the city are what you see there. I'm not going to get into all of this because don't want to get going too long. So whenever we started looking at the arrests themselves, we started with a temporal analysis to try and determine any sort of trends, any sort of seasonality with the actual data and the arrest. As you can see, June of 2023, there was a significant increase in arrest, and for every month after that. That coincides with a change in strategy by the Dallas Police Department, as well as a task force mentality. They brought in a lot of people and they started focusing on certain areas. So that's the reason you see this significant uptick from 2022 to 2023, which does in some ways kind of make the numbers a little bit skewed. This is the same frequencies across the days of the week. You obviously see an uptick towards the end of the week, Thursday, Fridays, and then as well as that bottom table covers the actual patrol divisions. The map to the right describes, or you can see how the divisions are separated within Dallas. At the very end of this, we'll go over some of the actual analysis, which was conducted on those four, the Northwest, South Central, Southeast, and Southwest, which had the highest numbers of arrests but that's towards the end. The first thing we did was look across the city, examining the risk factors that showed to be more significant. When this is for all years, from 2022 through 2024, we see that convenience stores, hotels and motels, food banks, gas stations, restaurants, all have significant relative risk values and significantly increase the chance. Moving from all of the data that we had and starting to break it down over the time period, we moved into 2022, used that data, the 700 and something arrest of that year, and gas stations, hotels, motels, and restaurants and liquor stores all still had relatively high risk values and significantly increased the probabilities. 2023 saw much the same thing, moving across the different locations that we examined. And in 2024, granted, this is only half a year, it goes through August. But again, you do notice that the hotel motels and move farther down, and one that had not appeared was grocery stores, meat, and retail type shopping centers moved into the upper portion of the probabilities and the relative risk values. This is where the actual we broke it down into each division. Each division is these are the four divisions, and this is the full data set. I did break it down farther in the paper, but I just don't have time to go over it today. And you start to see in each division how there are certain areas and certain parts of each division that have different locations that increase the relative risk value. Hotel motels, gas stations, convenience stores, those tend to be up at the top for each of these. Perhaps the most prominent one is in the Southeast Division. The hotels, motels significantly increased that relative risk value, significantly demonstrated a significant increase. There's quite a bit of other stuff other analysis that I conducted for this, but I just don't have time to get into it all today. And for each location, but the overall takeaway from this is being able to use the values that you come up with through risk terrain modeling and apply this to a policing context, whether it be for targeted patrol or other types of enforcement operations. Taking this information allows you to do that, and hopefully you can be more targeted with what you are working on and what you are targeting and allocating your officers. Other than that, I don't have anything else.
All right, very good. Thank you, David. Give people a second to jot down your email address. Hopefully they'll follow up with you and keep the conversation going. Paul, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Super, thank you. Try and share. Hopefully you can see that. Yes, all good.
Yes, we got it.
I will invite Sam to come and speak to you about his project. He's up. Okay. Really? Yeah.
Hello, everyone. I'm here to talk about my undergraduate major project, which used risk terrain modeling to locate and highlight fly tipping hotspots. So, firstly, what is fly tipping? Fly tipping is fly tipping is a crime under the Environmental Protection Act of 1990. It's defined as the illegal dumping of waste on either public or private land. It can also take place in water. It costs local councils and taxpayers thousands and millions of pounds, depending on whether you're looking at a regional number or the overall central numbers from the government. As shown in the chart here, fly tipping is rarely actioned. Only about 50% end up getting an enforcement action, which is normally some kind of fine or financial penalty brought against the offender. So the process that we used was that we made contact with East Cambridgeshire District Council. East Cambridgeshire was chosen because it's local to ARU, and both myself and Paul have local knowledge of the area. It's quite a rural district. It's got a population of about 80,000 people, and the most densely populated area is Ely. We contacted them for their locations, and we drew up this map first, as seen on the screen. There are some points that fall outside of the East Cambridgeshire boundary, and this will be brought up later. But as you can see, there are a lot of fly tipping offences that occur in the main area of Ely, some in Wisbech and more in Wychford, which is to the west. Once we created this map, we created a list of potential features that were available in GeoFabric. We were looking for places that would be secluded, lack of a capable guardian, and places where there's no surveillance. So the map that we got was this. As is shown, Ely again was quite a hotspot for fly tipping, and Witchford as well, and there's some more up in the support. So I called that Whiz Beach earlier, his little port. On the right, you can see the relative risk score. Bus stops were 16 times more likely to be an area where fly tipping would occur. And this is potentially because of where bus stops are located in lay-bys of busy roads. And also there will be quite a lot in the built-up areas. Fast food places were quite high. We think this because bins might overflow, people might dump food waste, etc. on the premises, and postbox was a bit of an anomaly, wasn't expected to be highlighted, but nonetheless it's on there. Once we created this map, we noticed a few patterns that emerged. These patterns were at risk, but they weren't on any major roads. It was eventually found that they were actually railroads. So these are both train lines. On the left here, you can see train line going towards Whiz Beach, Kings Lynn to the north, and then to the northwest, that train line along Little Downham goes towards Peterborough, and then another one here and so on. This wasn't expected, but there is a precedent for fly tipping on railroads. At the same time that we were doing this research, National Rail put out a plea and published some articles trying to raise awareness of fly tipping on railroads and how that can impact their services and the safety of people nearby. And to conclude, there were some limitations that we found with the research. So, for example, some of our data was a bit unreliable, as QGIS would geolocate things to the center of a road. So it might not be completely accurate. It might have happened at the end of a road where a feature occurs, but it's not at the other end. And that was it. There was also talk of we could run another RTM in a similar location or a similar region to see if we get the same results or if there's anything different. Another difficulty with it is that this uses data from both built up urban areas and rural areas. So the urban areas that might be at risk might not be the same kind of thing that you might expect in the rural area, and vice versa. So if you were to separate out the urban area from the rural, you may get differing results. Thank you.
Thank you. Always exciting to see something you did not expect as a product of your analysis. Thank you. Olga, back to you.
All right, last but not least, Chris is going to present on something outside of Texas for a change.
All right, thank you. Let's see here. Okay. Here. I need this to come up. Okay, do you see the full presentation?
We see the presenter slides.
Oh, the presenter slides. Okay, so let me.
We can still see the main slide. It might not be treating it as an extended.
There we go. I will got her fixed here. Did it switch to full?
Not yet.
No. Okay. Sorry, let me see a second. Share.
Oh, there we go.
There. Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Yeah, we're going to take a trip out of Texas here for a second, go to the northwest of the United States to Oregon. And I was interested in, it's more exploratory to see if electric vehicle charging stations were a risky place. So I started looking at it, and cities are increasing their green infrastructure, and it turns out 1.3 million electric vehicles were sold in the United States last year. There's 185,000 plus charging stations in the United States, but I chose Portland specifically because Oregon has the fifth most charging stations, and then Portland's the largest city within Oregon. And Portland's also was an early adopter of infrastructure, and they're considered an electric vehicle friendly city. And so I wanted to look at whether the affected change in routine activities increased the risk. And so I came up with this question. So it's basically exploratory, utilizing risk terrain modeling, including the geocoding function. I used a lot of the geocoding function. I wanted to focus on three primary criminal offense categories, and that was vehicle thefts, personal assaults, and property crimes, but more specifically larcenies, which included like theft from vehicle, in those areas, and I divided it temporally by daytime and nighttime. And so electric vehicle charging stations, there's multiple levels, or we classify them as level 1 and 2 are your slow charging stations, between 3 miles per charging hour to 20 miles per charging hour. So individuals with electric vehicles will be stuck at those stations a little bit longer. Level 3 are your rapid charging stations, generally take you about 20 minutes for a full charge, and those are less. And so this came up with 6 distinct RTM models. Daytime vehicle thefts, this is just overall the numbers we had, and I only looked at 2024 as a single year, so very limited in scope. These are just the overall incidents that they had in Portland. Again, went over, so I had 128 electric vehicle charging stations within the city of Portland, 1 and 2, and only 15 rapid charging stations. And so here's the maps, and on the left, this is vehicle thefts. On the left is daytime thefts, and on the right was nighttime. And so this is just the high risk. You had RS greater than 8.2. During the day and 7.3 at night, which is interesting, and we'll get into that. I want to spend, here's your assaults. And this included both aggravated assault and simple assaults. So we have those divided up in the United States of whether they used, it's a more violent crime or just simple assault. Here's the larcenies, the theft from vehicles, theft of personal items. And then I want to spend most of my time here on the RRVs, right? So some consistencies, significant things I found here is level 1 and 2 EV stations, bars, ATMs, and gas stations were significant in all 6 models. I utilized the bars, ATMs, and the gas stations based off literature as to kind of give us a comparison of known that has a lot of research versus there's not a lot of electric vehicle charging station research out there. Most of the research is on targeting of the electric vehicle charging stations themselves and not the people around them. Significant EV 1 and 2 stations were significant with all 3 crime types and through both temporal dimensions, which is interesting. Now, level 3, another interesting thing, if you look at level 3 EV station, and I have the M dash here to show that it was not significant in all of them except for daytime larcenies was the rapid stations. Now, one thing I will say that only 1 of the 15 rapid stations were located in the downtown area. And if you go back to the maps, the highlighted, the most of the high spots were in downtown. Yet also another interesting thing, the spatial influence on all of the crime types was 610 feet. Other than daytime assaults, it reduced to within 305 feet. And so that was interesting. And per model, as you can see, vehicle thefts in the daytime, they're 4 times more. The level 1, 2 EVs chasings were the dominant one in all of the crime categories, but it was 4 times more relative risk for the daytime, and then only 3.5 in the nighttime. And that was another thing that we saw was, normally we think about crime more occurring at night, and this was kind of a reverse where it has a higher risk during the day than at night. And there's probably lots of things that could explain that. Assaults during the daytime, 6.5 more times relative risk. Assaults at nighttime, 5.5 more. Larcenies during the daytime, 4.5 more times. And as you see, that's the only model that had the level 3 rapid stations was increased during the daytime up to almost two times the relative risk. And then nighttime, the 1 and 2 stations were 5 times more. Just did that discussion. So this is very exploratory or very introductory, and it was to see if if these sites were taking a more deeper dive. And so that's where I want to go in the future. Actually look at maybe what are the similarities in some of these charging stations that are higher than the others. A more micro. This is a very macro look at things, and in the future, I'd like to do a little more micro look. And then this is a single city, so I'm limited in that. Extend that out to other cities across, and I feel it's very important with how rapidly we're increasing our green infrastructure in our cities, that this has a lot of policy implications. And RTM was instrumental in really breaking that down in this in doing this research. And that's all I got.
Thank you so much. Got lots of questions. I don't have an electric vehicle, so I'm not personally affected by it, but I've got lots of questions for those who are. So we'll hopefully get to that in just a minute. Paul, I think you're up, and
Yep, I have the final.
more.
Amy, I think you're going to enjoy this one. Can we see it?
We got it.
Got it.
From electric vehicles to shipwrecks.
Okay, cool. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So I'm a recent graduate from the Bachelor of Science Crime and Investigative Studies course at Anglia Ruskin, and this was my major project. So I'm looking at illegal shipwreck salvaging. So wreck salvaging falls under heritage crime, which is outlined as any offence where considerable damage or loss is to historically relevant places and objects. And wreck sites are considered historical places due to their maritime history that they provide. So wrecks within the UK are protected under 3 main legislations: the Merchant Shipping Act, the Protection of Wrecks Act, and the Protection of Military Remains Act. And we have an estimated 37,000 wrecks in the England coastline. However, of those 37,000 wrecks, only 57 are actively monitored and protected by external organisation Historic England. And within those 57 wrecks, there's been 56 documented offences spanning from 1991 to 2024. So within my project, we looked at a number of factors, including lighthouses, ports, Royal National Lifeboat stations and wind farms, and also several shapefiles surrounding oil infrastructure. Only 5% of our analysis areas was highlighted to be potential risks, with the highest priority areas being in the south of England. And only one factor was deemed statistically significant, and that was the location of Royal National Lifeboat stations, which had a risk value of 40.5 attached to it.
Therefore, wrecks within the UK that are most vulnerable to illegal wreck looting are located near lifeboat stations and predominantly in the southeast of England. We come across quite a few limitations when we were studying this research. One being there's a notable lack of research currently within the area, but also accuracy and availability of data from open source. And also the accessibility to run the data on the software. So for example, like tidal patterns and depth was really difficult. With future recommendations, we're really interested to see and predominantly zone into the southeast of England, but also look at specific wrecks within these risk sites and whether or not their materials they're made from or the cargo they carry make them more likely to be targeted. Thank you.
Well done. That was very good.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Awesome. I think that's our last one. Is that correct, Olga and Paul?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Awesome.
from me.
Great.
Real quick, before we get into the Q&A, just in case some people need to leave, Nate, are you still on from University of Tampa?
Yes, I'm here.
So I wanted to give Nate a chance to talk about the University of Tampa's program and how they will be involved in the future.
Yes, I appreciate the chance and opportunity to join the call and hear some of the interesting research that y'all are doing in so many different areas. And I think why it is so of interest to us at the University of Tampa is we are attempting to pilot some of this with our undergraduate and grad students as well. So seeing the depth and breadth and scope of the research opportunities presented here is really neat. We've done some of the RTM training for our staff and students, and now we're transitioning into, it looks like, the next step, which is the phase that you guys are at and really applying it with students. And we have a couple active projects getting off the ground now, several students looking at schools, a couple students looking at convenience stores, and then some other students looking at interesting topical ideas to generate RTM research around. So really thankful for the opportunity to learn from all of you, students and faculty alike, to see the cool work that you are doing in this area. So thank you.
Cool. All right. So I'm going to go through the Q&As first, and please feel free to keep adding info in there. But first, there are a couple questions for Will on your presentation about societal factors. So Will, first question is, did you account for the covariance between multiple societal factors?
Sorry, could you just explain that a little bit further, please? Just
well, this is from an anonymous attendee, so I'm not sure who can, but
okay, sorry.
They just asked, how did you account for covariance between societal factors?
I'll be completely honest, I would like a bit more clarity about the question. I mean,
yeah, for sure. So whoever asked that, if you could just ask or give some more detail and we can come back to it. Second question for you, Will. Do you have any information on what types of calls that the officers were responding to when they were assaulted? And did any specific types of calls stand out?
No, so the information which I used for the assaults was all public. It was just purely a total number rather than the situation that they were in. I mean, there are so many different situations that these officers could have been in. You know, you think of all like events, like sporting events or music, like concerts, but then it could just be, you know, they're patrolling a city at night and people are coming out of clubs and they're drunk and stuff like that. And there's so many different factors that can lead to the escalation of assaults against these officers. So yeah, to answer your question, no, there wasn't, I didn't have the specific situations, but I mean, you could probably think of 10, 20 different situations yourself that they could be in that could cause these.
Certainly. Cool. All right. Kevin, are you sharing this information with the city of Fort Worth?
The short answer is no. This was my own selfish endeavor. I didn't plan on releasing it. If they asked for it, certainly. They recently had a special meeting with some experts where they identified one of the bigger problems with their homeless population was surprisingly lack of affordable housing, which after COVID, the funding for housing dried up. So I think Fort Worth's looking towards expanding their affordable housing opportunities, which I think may shift the risk factors definitely in a different way, because I think we're going to see a different concentration of the homeless population elsewhere within the city other than these public transit, public accessible areas. But so the short answer, no, I I wasn't.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'm actually meeting with Fort Worth on Friday, so I can bring it up though.
Hey, there you go. There you go.
Question for Shay. Did you find any difference between, or I'm sorry, more so this is a cultural question, sorry, from Paul. Do different sports fans, like basketball versus hockey, have different cultural aspects or kind of a different culture around attending an event?
Yeah, I would say yes. But with a grain of salt, I am very biased towards the hockey community. I'm pretty, heavily invested in that. But yes, I mean, I think you look at any sport, football here in the United States, basketball and hockey, it's going to be a different crowd wherever you go. And I've only been to one basketball game, and compared to going to all the hockey games I go to, entirely different crowd, entirely different atmosphere. Yeah, there's definitely cultural differences between, the sports, especially what's going on before the game, after the game, and during the game itself, if that answers the question.
Yeah, and I think, Paul, just for context, we don't have any culture that is like football culture in the UK. But they are different. Okay. Question for, I think, Autumn, Dawn, and Ela. Are the bus stops that you studied, are they public transit, or are they private bus lines, or both?
From my understanding of our UK bus systems, it's a bit of a mix of both.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And you didn't look at them differently in the analysis?
No, we grouped them all together.
Great. For the fly tipping folks, did you consider a relationship between where the did you consider a relationship between where the fly tipping occurred, so where your offense was recorded, and where the closest place where they could legally dump rubbish?
Yeah, so I don't know if you remember back to the map, but what Sam highlighted was there was a place called Witchford, which is a legal site to dump, to go and get rid of your waste. And the council, when it was presented to the council presumed it became a hotspot because people turn up outside of hours and leave it up the gate. And that then contributes. So yeah, I think that's why that village is perhaps plagued by it.
Gotcha. Back to Shay on your sporting issues. Do you have any policy recommendations regarding this? And something that I wanted to add, because it's a similar question. Obviously, Dallas-Fort Worth is going to be hosting several FIFA events in whatever year that is. So does this relate to, maybe how we could prepare for that?
I'll answer the first part. Right now, I wouldn't recommend any policy recommendations because it's still pretty narrow in what I'm actually examining. And it's not really generalizable to other areas. What I would like to do in the future research is actually take this same study and then apply it to other dual tenant venues such as Ball Arena in Colorado, TD Garden in Boston, and a couple other areas to actually see if these themes kind of translate. And then as far as the second question on with the World Cup and stuff coming to Dallas, I do think that if I'm make sure I'm answering the question right, I do think there is definitely benefit to using this type of, RTM. If you say use this on like previous major events like the Super Bowl or other World Cups and Olympics and kind of see what those risk factors are there, and then kind of prep for that. But yes, I do think it'd be beneficial. But as far as my specific study relating to that large scale mega event that's coming, I don't think that would be hard to say.
Yeah, I understand. Okay. Sam, back on fly tipping. How did you decide on fly tipping, and how much of a, how big is the concern in regard to fly tipping in the UK as a public issue? I think that's more of a social question, because here in the States, we don't necessarily focus on it as much.
I'd argue that it's not enough people are aware of it. It's still quite a big issue. You find a lot of places in the UK have signs up, or they have like CCTV up, and they say fly tippers will be prosecuted. But for a lot of people, it's often seen as like a get rich quick scheme. So one theory that we had was that people will post on like Facebook Marketplace, I've got some rubbish that I need to get rid of, but I don't have a car, or it's too much for me to handle. And then someone will message them and say, oh, I'll take it for you. And instead of paying the fees and the tax to take it to a proper recycling center, they'll take it either down the end of the road or into a field somewhere that they're not going to be seen, and they'll unload it all there. So there needs to be some work with like social media companies to start vetting these people who might be using their services for that. But also there just needs to be more done to raise public awareness of it, because it's quite damaging to the environment, and it can be really dangerous for wildlife. Depending on what the rubbish is, you could get electricals with batteries, you can get construction wastes, anything, really.
Absolutely. Yeah. Chris, question on, for next steps in your research, what would you, other states that you would expand your research to first, or other areas you would expand to first?
Sure. Yeah. I think Los Angeles and California would be a good area. They have the most electric vehicle charging station, and they're pretty open with their crime data. So that's the key, right? Trying to find those where you can get both, where there's a good, account of all the electric vehicle charging stations. And that's another thing that, depending on different states, how they register their charging stations, and their whole process of installing or how they decide where to put their charging stations. And so I would say yes, California definitely could look at New York, even New York. It's kind of hard. I don't want to get too out of bounds with the population sizes either, right? To make it generalizable, but yeah. Even in Europe too, like, Berlin, believe Berlin has the most charging stations of anywhere in the world. London has, a ton, and how they go about it. So even expanding that to some international context, I think you could really take this in a lot of different directions and look at it. So hope that answers the question.
Awesome. A couple of questions for Amy on the salvage research. So first, what is the motivation to salvage these shipwrecks? Is it financial? What are they, if they are doing this for resale, what are they looking for?
Yeah, so maybe it's the economic salvaging, particularly of scrap metal. So particularly like our World War I and World War II warships are made from something called low background steel, which is increasingly valuable. So for the high commercial scavengers, that's what they're particularly targeting.
And then, so it's not necessarily they're looking for a wristwatch or something.
No, it's the material that the vessels are made from.
And then second question is, who is responsible for enforcement of this? Like what legal entity?
So everyone who goes to a ship has to basically, I don't know what the word is, but something called the receiver of wreck, and you have to notify them if you find or take anything from a wreck site, and they decide whether or not it's historically valuable, and if so, if it needs to go back. If you fail to do that, then there's a number of different avenues that you'll be prosecuted through. So it's usually by our police services, and it can range from theft to criminal damage to even fraud. Most recent, one of the ones in the UK, someone got a jail sentence of 4 years because of money attained through illegal salvaging.
Gotcha. And so would it be the police service that is on that has that area of coast, the territorial police, or would it be one of the national police services?
So it will be the police area that cover that area. So with one
Gotcha.
of our county forces.
Gotcha. Okay, what for Shay on the sporting events, did you have any data on whether or not there were mobile security trailers, KPR, or anything like that where these burglaries were occurring?
No, I did not. And that is something that I would like to look into further, like get with Dallas to see if they have any information on that. And also the second part of that question asked about security cameras in those parking lots. I'd also be interested to see if there's anything like that, because I do recall trying to look for something like that, but I couldn't find with Dallas if there is any like database or anything like that. So for the sake of this specific one, I think I just left it out, but it's definitely something I do want to look into to, for further information on that.
Gotcha. And then, okay, so the rest of these, I think, have mostly been answered. I wanted to go over, since David Dickey had to drop, one person asked, was the hotel density in Dallas normal compared to other large cities? So David basically said that he didn't actually include that density analysis within his statistical analysis, but Dallas is a very large tourist destination. So you consider that in comparison to other tourist destinations. And the Metroplex is what those of us that live here call the Dallas-Fort Worth area. It is a conurbation for those that are looking for a real term, meaning a large urban area that is made up of multiple small towns, but we're all jam-packed together. So much like everyone in the States thinks of London as London, but in fact, London is many different boroughs that are all smashed together, and each one of those boroughs has its own government. It's kind of the same thing with Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. There's about 200 different municipalities here. So it's a good place for him to go in the future. And then, a breakdown of, is it a hotel versus a motel? What is their star rating? What is their pricing per night? All of these could be things that you further break down this information is what he was suggesting.
If I can add, I'm sorry, David is on riot duty today. That's why he had to leave. So he did break down a little bit on the motel hotel just to start, and there was a difference. So I think there is a lot of potential, because we do know that those motels that are low cost would be more likely to be risky places for drug transactions like this.
Got it. And then back to Will. We got some clarification.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
no,
go ahead.
I can answer that now. Yeah. So, I mean, my risk terrain modeling focused on the 5 societal factors as like primary risk variables. I did acknowledge that covariates such as like alcohol-related incidents or offender histories, which have been proven in research as influential factors during these assaults, they weren't explicitly included within my dissertation. This is probably mainly due to data constraints and availability of the data published by the government and police. But I think the correlations between the factors I analysed do reveal how they all jointly influence assault risk. So yeah.
Gotcha. Well, I think that address all of well, no, I take it back. Last question for Shay. Do you have any recommendations that you might give to leaders of these cities that have kind of either a large sporting institution or a facility that is hosting multiple types of events like the Star Center? that, or American Airlines Center, that you might be able to implement in policy? What are they going to do with their law enforcement during or something like that?
Yeah, again, as far as a full-scale policy recognition, I can't really say to do that yet because there's still a lot more work to do. But one thing just from this preliminary study I would like to say is, this also comes me being a law enforcement officer too, focus on the areas outside of that immediate vicinity because we know the research shows that crime sometimes can spill into nearby areas. And I want to say, even when I was looking into the relationship between sports and crimes, especially on some of these bigger events like the Super Bowl and things of that nature, it does spill into other areas. So, yeah, that's one thing I would say is, just from a professional practitioner point is, always look at the areas outside of where you're responsible for that event.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, I think we've covered all the questions that were open so far. Obviously, if you have any further questions, I know a lot of our participants shared their emails. If you think of something later on and you don't have that email, you can email me, andy@simc.com, and I will forward those on to all of the different researchers here. We're really glad to be able to support y'all. And, from the SIMC perspective, there's a great application of evidence-based crime prevention. Research has been done here. So many of these things can be turned around and then turned into an ops plan. You can sometimes you might need to distill it a little bit further from looking at assaults on police officers at a large scale versus how can I look at assaults on police officers within one city or one beat or one district. There's some research on that out of Canada. So if you want to talk to SIMC more about how do I put this into operation in my streets as a law enforcement officer, or if you are here on the academic side and you want to learn how to use this from a academic application and to further your own research, please do reach out to me. Other than that, I'm going to hand this back to Joel from Rutgers Center on Public Security, and he can wrap this up. And we will make this recording available online, and we'll post it on the event registration site.
Thank you, Andy. I want to give a big shout out and a round of applause, virtual or real, if your mics are on, to the instructors and the presenters. I know that you all work together in the classroom and out to really make today's success. Your instructors are just professionals and wise beyond their years, and they really shared knowledge in a way that made it actionable, and we can see that in the work that you presented today. So thank you to them and to all of the presenters today. I know you put a lot of work into making these presentations short and clear, and that is a difficult thing to do, especially for something that is otherwise complex. So you really did distill this down into things that can be a catalyst for continuing the conversation. These were intended to be lightning talks, which is why this is a SPARC, pun intended, conference. I hope that it does ignite some further conversations and everybody follows up. And as you continue to pursue these ideas in your research, maybe into publications or theses and so on and so forth. We will share contact information for the presenters. Maybe there's some opportunities for working together on some of this moving forward. And all of you have earned a certificate from the Rutgers Center on Public Security for our TMDX certification. So that will be following from this conversation and today's presentation. And I want to give the last word to your instructors, Olga or Paul. Any last words or comments? Give a shout out to your programs. Anybody who's interested in learning, getting your degrees and or certificates, reach out to them and to their schools. They're doing some great work. Paul, Olga, anything? All good?
I just want to say thank you. I know all my students are working, so thank you so much for coming and taking time to present. I know this was not an easy task because of the distilling really large papers into lightning talks. And I really appreciate the international context. I think this adds a new dimension, and I'm hoping we continue doing this again next year.
Cheers to that. Thank you, Olga. Paul, I know it's getting late for you.
I think the pub's open. Just again, really grateful for the invite. Well done to all the presenters, all the students from here in North America, It was really interesting to hear different perspectives and different ideas. Yeah, I think hopefully everyone's benefited from listening to that. It's been great.
Thank you, Paul. All right, thank you, Andy, for all the work that you put into this. I know it wasn't easy, but logistically it worked. It worked well, and we appreciate you for that. We'll give everybody the rest of their day, and thank you so much for your time. It was really inspiring. Great work. Be
Thank you,
well.
everybody.